Thank you. So my name is Terry Rice, and today we'll be talking about digital marketing essentials. And my goal is to give you a good foundational understanding of digital marketing best practices, and then for you to use that to grow in areas that you're particularly interested in. Before we get started, quick question here. What is the most Instagrammed food around the world? What do you think? I heard hamburgers, I heard ice cream, what else? Salad? Pretty healthy. What else? Pizza. There you go. Yeah. That's just the beginning of what we're going to learn about today. So yes, pizza is the most Instagram food around the world. And in fact, Instagram gets the most engagement out of any social media channel. Right? But just because it gets engagement does not mean you're necessarily getting conversions. And that's what I want to talk about today. Looking at data and saying, okay, what is my desired outcome from that? And am I achieving it efficiently? So again, my name's Terry Rice, and I'm a digital marketing instructor here at NYU. Last semester, I taught a search marketing class, which covered paid search as well as SEO. And this semester, I'm teaching a Facebook and Instagram marketing class, so let me know if you have more questions about that. I'm also a trainer and consultant at my own company. It's called Brooklyn Digital Marketing. I called it that because I did not want to spend a lot of time thinking of a cool name. I live in Brooklyn. I do digital marketing. That's it, right? Before that, I was a client solutions manager at Facebook. And in that role, I partnered with enterprise and emerging level companies to help them monetize Facebook and Instagram. I had a similar role before that when I was at Adobe. I was a search engine marketing consultant. So again, helping companies better leverage paid search marketing to achieve their business goals. So that's me, but let's talk about Kanye. This is one of my favorite quotes from Kanye, and I'll read it to you. It says, "I hate when I'm on a flight and I wake up with a water bottle next to me like, oh great, now I gotta be responsible for this water bottle," such as this one, right? But there's a really big reason why you get so much water when you're on a flight. Humidity. So in your normal surrounding, the humidity is around 40 to 70%. But when you're flying, it's actually between 10 and 20%. So it's actually recommended that you drink about 8 ounces of water for every hour that you're in flight. Now, for me, when I fly, it's often for business. And if I'm dehydrated, let's talk about some of those negative effects you can have. You can be irritable, confused, sleepy, or get a headache. So if I'm traveling for business and I'm doing a lot of talking, that's not a good combination, right? So for me, it's really important to be hydrated, but for all of you, it is as well. And that leads me to my next topic of conversation, the Hydrate Spark. Raise your hand if you've heard of this before. So the Hydrate Spark is a smart water bottle that tracks your water intake and glows to tell you when it's time to drink. It also syncs with several apps such as Fitbit, right? So it's a way for you to monitor your water intake throughout the day and make sure that you're hitting the optimal level. And this is the use case we're going to use today to talk about digital marketing. We're going to try to sell these things. One other thing I'll tell you about the Hydrate Spark is it costs about 60 bucks. So there's going to be some convincing going along. I see the reactions. I get it, right? We're going to have to convince people why they need to buy a $60 water bottle. So with that, what is digital marketing? All right, this term gets thrown around a lot. It can include social media, it can include paid search, it can include SEO, search engine optimization. But if you were to just Google it and get a definition, this is what it would say. It's using digital technologies for the targeted, measurable, and interactive marketing of products or services. So that's when we start thinking about other things such as apps and even chatbots, right? Some more non-traditional forms of digital marketing. And I have a few keywords highlighted here because for me, that's the most important aspect. Super targeted. If we wanted to, we could target every dentist in Park Slope who likes the Spice Girls and ask why, what's your deal? That's how targeted we can get. It's also measurable, which is great because you can't optimize what you can't measure. So I'm really bullish on making sure we have the proper tracking on our websites and our apps so that we can measure the outcomes of our campaigns. And then lastly, it's interactive. We see this a lot with social media. All right, so if you had a billboard somewhere on Broadway right now that said, Famous Joe's has the best pizza in Brooklyn, okay, it's a billboard, it's great, but it's very passive. However, if you had a social media post that says the same thing, you might get some comments from the people that see it, saying, yeah, the pizza's great, but the delivery time's horrible. Or why'd your prices go up? Or do you deliver to Bensonhurst? All right, so now you're actually having a conversation with people that see your content, and then from there you can make a better product. But with that, it's extremely important to know your audience. So that's why I like this phrase, know your audience or you'll have no audience. One of the first questions I ask any of my clients or prospects is, who is your target audience? Because before I start talking and thinking about outcomes, I need to know who this product is for. Because I'm often wrong. My assumptions can be wrong. So you need to define your audience because that's how you have more genuine interactions with them. So before we start pushing any buttons or making any cool Snapchat ads, we need to know who it's for. So there's this patience that goes into it. And this is marketing 101. This is not digital marketing. But one challenge that I see quite often is there are some people that are really good at the technical aspects of digital marketing. All right, they can code, they can put some pixels on somewhere, or they understand this algorithm that we're talking about. But what they often lack is marketing 101, where you're having empathy for who you're targeting and saying, what message should I deliver to them based on what stage of awareness they are. Even more important with water, right? Because we all need water, obviously, right? But we have options for how we want to drink that water. Some people are going to be happy with just a cup, right? I'm good to go. Others might want to have a water bottle, like a Camel pack. We need to find the people that are going to want to use this Hydrate Spark. And that's a very defined audience. Because again, it's $60, right? It's not just something you would just buy on a whim. So with that, who's this person? What's he known for? Dave? Dave from Wendys. Yeah, this is Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendys. I understand I'm dating myself to an extent right now. But yes, this is Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendys. And when I was a kid, these are the ads that you would see for Wendys. This friendly-looking guy waiting to give you a burger, even though it never looks like that in person. And they actually had some salads as well, too, right? So that's Dave Thomas. He was the face of Wendys when I was a kid growing up in the 80s and the 90s. But for any of you that have seen an ad or a post, especially on social media from Wendys lately, knows that this is not the face that they're putting out there, right? Yeah, things have changed with Wendys. There's a darker side of Wendys that we never knew about before, and it manifests itself on social media. Here's an example. This person, Cooper Franklin, said, Wendys needs to get rid of those square burgers. It seems a little too artificial. And at first I was like, oh, good point. Wendys replied, unlike the supernatural circle shape that hamburgers come in when you pick them off the vine. Good point, Wendys, right? So they're pretty snarky in their social media, especially on Twitter. And they actually go after other fast food restaurants sometimes too, which I just think is hilarious. Here's an example. So McDonald's, they had this tweet that was supposed to go out on Black Friday, and it says, need copy and link, meaning they accidentally posted the template, not the tweet, right? With that, Wendys jumped on it and said, when the tweets are as broken as the ice cream machine, which is hilarious, right? So they have this timely and relevant content, but it's a lot snarkier than Dave Thomas ever would have been, all right? Some of you might have noticed that they also just dropped a mixtape. Wendys now has a mixtape called Why We Beefin'. Exactly, right? So they have this edgier personality, and it's because, times have changed, and so has their target audience. So back in the 80s, the 90s, they were targeting families to come to Wendys, sit down and have a good meal. I'm doing fake air quotes when I say good meal, right? But now they're targeting younger people, right? So college students, right? When I was in college, this was good, like hangover food, right? You got to soak up all that alcohol, right? How do they know that, though? They did their research, which is what more brands need to do, because often we assume who our target audience is and what they're interested in without doing any kind of research whatsoever. So with that, one of my favorite tools to do that is Audience Insights from Facebook. And with this tool, you can take a known audience, such as people that have an interest in Wendys or Nike or NYU, and look at various attributes that's pulled directly from your Facebook profile, the websites you visit, as well as third-party data providers such as Oracle or Nielsen. So that's how they know that you binge watch Friends, right? They're sharing it with Nielsen data. So right now, let's take a look at Wendys' audience. Right now, we can see that they skew a little bit younger. So there's two lines here if we go to the far left. There's a light gray line, and there's a darker blue line. The dark blue line represents Wendys' audience, and we see that they're more likely between the 18 and 24-year-old range than anywhere else on Facebook. So they are younger. Same thing with 25 to 34. All right, so not necessarily that family of 4 that we're targeting. We can go more deep with this though. Check this out. We can see the relationship status. Why? Because that's what you put on your Facebook profile, right? This is first-party data, right? So we see that they're more likely to be single, where it says plus 19%. That means they're 19% more likely than anyone else on Facebook to be single. They're 33% more likely to be in a relationship, and actually 38% more likely to be engaged. However, they're 26% less likely to be married. So they can't quite get over that hump. I guess I just decided to go to Wendys instead. But in looking at this data, again, it's not that family of 4 going there. We can get more granular and even look at their income, right? We see how much money they're making, and if you pay attention, you'll notice that they're much more likely to be in these lower bands of income, people that make between 30 and 40, 40 and 50, so on and so forth, and much less likely to make over a couple $100,000, right? So with that, we're getting some clues about who they are as a person, their income, things of that nature, but where you're really gonna see much more of someone's personality is the pages that they like, right? Because you're literally pushing a button saying, I like this kind of content. Here's Wendys. So what do they like? Under food and beverage, that's gonna be column 5, they like Lifesavers gummies, which is pretty specific, right? For their insurance company, not just Progressive, but Flow from Progressive, who I would say is pretty hilarious in my opinion. Products or services, we see glow sticks. So we're getting an idea who this audience is. And before we move forward, one thing I want to tell you is this can also be your data that you're looking at from your audience. Anyone that's on your email list, anyone that goes to your website, anyone that ever made a purchase, and I'm just going to assume that data is going to look a lot different for you than it would for Wendys. But this is what's available to you. And this is how you start making a buyer persona or a customer persona. You might have heard about that before. Because it gives us more input on who we're targeting as a person. Let's do a few more. In regards to their media they consume, being hyper, which just sounds obnoxious. I'm not even sure what that is. They watch Adult Swim. They go to Hot Topic. That's where they buy clothes. Right? So we're getting an idea who these people are. They're younger. They're like kind of like this ravey crowd. And they also like bacon, which I think is a good idea. It's pretty universal. So again, we're getting a good idea of who these people are based on the pages that they like. So that's really important because with digital marketing, you need to provide value in exchange for your target audience's attention. Because we're bombarded with ads all day long. How are you going to stand out and provide value? This honeycomb you see on the board is a great way to do so, right? If it's helpful, if it's entertaining, if it's unique, is it educational? When you're creating content, you want to make sure that you're checking off a few of these boxes instead of just talking about yourself. And I'm surprised at how many brands just talk about themselves all day long. We have this new product. You know, we just moved to a new office. We just got a new CMO. Nobody cares. You got to provide value first, and then talk about some other aspects of your company. So one healthy thing to do is look at all the content you have out there, especially on your social media platforms, and do an audit. 80% should be providing value. I mean, you can check off a few of these boxes and say, look, I am providing value to my target audience. Then sure, 20% should say, click here, buy now, or here's what we're doing. But I'm often surprised at how backwards that is with companies. Just talking about themselves all day long instead of providing value to the target audience. Super important. That's how we earn that engagement. And the more engagement you get, the more reach or eyeballs you get on your content. So we call that impressions as well. Because if these platforms, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, if they notice people are engaging with your content by clicking, liking, sharing, commenting, they're saying, okay, this is good content. People saw that and were not annoyed by another post from a brand on Facebook. They engaged with it. Therefore, we will show it to more people. However, if you're not getting that engagement, they're saying this stuff is not interesting to the people that are seeing it. Therefore, less people will see it. Even the same thing with paid search marketing, where you're paying for the keywords you're bidding on to get a click. If your ad is showing up when someone Googles men's jeans and people do not click on it, you actually pay more to advertise. It's a metric called quality score. So regardless of what platform you're on, the more engagement you get, the more free impressions you get, Or if you are doing paid advertising, it's cheaper. You get rewarded for being relevant, and you can't be relevant if you don't understand your target audience. Super important to nail that down. But with that, let's now talk about campaign planning. And this is also another missing ingredient I often see from digital marketing campaigns, because it's very easy to start a campaign. There's a very low barrier to launching, right? You just set up an account, push a few buttons, within 5 minutes, you're good to go. There's not the same lead cycle you would have with traditional marketing, such as getting an ad in the newspaper, where you have to contact someone, write the content, make sure you spell the right, things like that. You're just pushing buttons, you're good to go. Which is why I often see campaign planning go out the window. This is the approach I standardize on when I'm planning campaigns for my clients or prospects, and often when I'm teaching as well. It's called the objective first framework, meaning you start with a goal. What do I want to do? Is it leads? Is it awareness? Is it some kind of conversion? You need to start with a goal and then build the rest of your plan around that. So for example, let's say my goal is a conversion, meaning someone signing up for my email list. I can say, okay, that's my objective, and then I need to define my KPIs. I think that's the first acronym I used so far, but what are KPIs? What's that mean? There you go. Key performance indicators. These are metrics such as cost per lead or conversion rate to let you know how well you're going towards achieving your goal. And I'm going to dive into Hydrate Spark a bit more to give you some more color around this whole approach. You then design your tactics. That's the way you're going to present business value in a way that triggers a customer need or desire. Executing the campaign, that's when you're pushing go. When I was at Adobe, I was an account manager. This was always the scariest part, because you're actually spending money in this case and waiting to get some data coming in, but you got to press go eventually. And then make sure you're measuring those outcomes. So we talk about Google Analytics a lot. I'm sure you've heard that before. There's also the LinkedIn pixel, the Facebook pixel, Twitter pixel, so on and so forth. That's why you got to be cool with your developer, because you're going to need him or her to help you measure these campaigns. And the more you can talk like a developer, saying, look, I need an on-click statement on this button, can you please set it up, the more quickly you'll get things accomplished, because you're not just saying, I need to measure stuff. And then from there, optimizing the results. For me, that's my favorite part, because you're looking at your data and saying, here's my desired outcome. Here are my key performance indicators. Now, which segments am I achieving that most efficiently in? What can I do better next time? And it's almost like, I'm sure you all have a friend who they're just like the king or queen of hindsight. Whenever you do something wrong, like, oh, you should have done that. You're like, well, thanks. That's pretty much what optimization is. That's why I like it, because I have a lot of data to play with and say, oh, you should not have pushed that button. Next time, don't. Then I come back a month later, and I consult some more. That's my job. So the objective for Hydrate Spark, we're going to say, is as follows. Our goal this quarter is to obtain 10,000 opt-in email addresses. I'm using this as an objective for a few reasons. One is it's very industry agnostic. It's not B2B, it's not B2C. Collecting leads is something most companies would do. Therefore, we can all wrap our heads around it. But with that, there are 3 critical elements to your objective that need to be in place to make sure you're set up for success. You need an event. In this case, it's collecting those email addresses. You need a numeric value, in this case, 10,000, and a time period, 1 quarter. If you're missing any of those critical elements, it's very hard to manage or optimize your campaigns. For example, if we were missing the time period and just said our goal is to obtain 10,000 opt-in email addresses, well, by when? Should I be worried right now? We only have 4? I don't know when I have to have 10,000 by, so I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. But if you know you need to have 10,000, and it's halfway through the quarter, and you only have 1,000, you're going to say, whatever I'm doing is not working. So we need to optimize in flight, meaning this plan right now is not going to work, so during this time period, we need to start making some changes before the end of the campaign, because we're not going to hit our goal. We'd say our run rate is below 100%, meaning we're not progressing towards our goal efficiently. So then again, we have these KPIs, these key performance indicators. And beyond knowing how they actually influence your goal, your progress towards your goal, you should know what you can do to change these KPIs. How can I get this higher or lower? So there should be some obvious action you should take to improve them. But one thing I want to warn you about with KPIs are vanity metrics. These are numbers or metrics that look good, but don't really mean much. For example, I just said our goal is to collect 10,000 email addresses. And if my agency came to me and said, hey, Terry, great news, we got 40,000 likes on your last ad, I would say, okay, cool. What about those leads we talked about earlier? That's the conversation you want to have. You don't want to get blinded by vanity metrics that don't necessarily impact your desired outcome. In this case, it's going to be likes when we say we want to get leads. Unless we can find a correlation between likes and leads, that's a vanity metric. It sounds cool, but what did that do for me? Not much. So then we have KPI targets as well, meaning what range do we want to be in for these KPIs? We're going to do some very light math right now, but let's walk through this. Again, our goal is to obtain 10,000 opt-in email addresses. If we have an ad budget of $20,000, and the formula for a cost per lead is your ad cost or your budget divided by leads, what is our target cost per lead? Meaning, how much can we pay per lead with our current budget? $2? That sound right? I'll go with that. $2, you're absolutely right. $20,000 budget, we want to get 10,000 leads. So yes, the most we can pay per lead is $2. And we would look at segments, maybe it's men versus women or one age group versus another, that are helping us get these acquisitions for $2 or less. Because if it's over $2, we'd exhaust our budget before hitting our goal. That's why we need KPIs as well as targets. Now, for some of you, you're going to have to ask yourself a question. Does this seem realistic? Can I get these leads at $2 or less? You're going to want to do some research on industry benchmarks for cost per lead or cost per click or cost per conversion as a starting point for this. But just realize you want to understand how unique each company is, and perhaps you can't necessarily hit that $2 cost per lead for one reason or another, but you at least have to have some kind of database of record saying, here's where I got these numbers from, that's why I think it should be $2. Otherwise, you're going back and forth saying, what do you think it should be? I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? But it just goes on forever. I've had that conversation, and someone's having it right now, right? So you don't want to do that. All right. So I have two ads up here for the Hydrate Spark. Ad A, ad B. One's more of a lifestyle one, the other one's a bit more direct in regards to use cases maybe when you're at work. But just take a moment to look at these. And eventually I'm going to ask all of you to vote which one you like better, A or B. So who prefers ad A, meaning they'd rather click on that one than ad B? Just raise your hand. Okay. All right. So who prefers ad B? All right, it's about a 60-40-ish split. Okay, got it. Cool. So with that, the ratio of people that see your ad and click on it, that's your click-through rate. You want that to be high. And your click-through rate greatly impacts how efficiently you're using your ad budget, because if you get more clicks with the same budget, you get more, you're using it more efficiently. So here's an example of how this would look using real data. We have ad A and we have ad B. The CPM for both these ads is $7. All right, what's CPM? What does that mean? CPM is correct, cost per 1,000 impressions. This is going to be the great equalizer across any channel, any ad group or ad set, because that tells you how much it costs to advertise to that audience in the first place. And some audiences are more expensive than others. For example, if we were to target everyone in the US who graduated high school, that's a very large audience, not a lot of competition, so the CPM would be low. But if we were to target everyone in the US who was a fan of the Buffalo Bills, it's going to be a smaller audience, therefore the CPM could be higher. So the smaller your audience, typically the higher your CPM, all things being equal. Or how competitive that audience is, because let's say we're targeting everyone in the US who makes over $500,000 a year, well, there's a lot of competition for that audience from people who have high ticket items, and they're willing to pay a lot to reach them. Because they get a conversion, maybe they're selling some cool trip to Australia or something like that. So they'll pay a lot per click, they'll pay a lot per conversion, because they're like, if we get a conversion, we're good. So you want to think about that. In this example, we have the same budget with both of these. So with a CPM of $7, we would get 1.4 million impressions for both ad A and ad B. The only thing that's going to change right now is the click-through rate. Ad A had a click-through rate of 3%. Ad B had a click-through rate of 1%. And that's going to change everything from here. Because since we had a higher click-through rate for ad A, we got more clicks out of the same budget, more traffic coming to your site. Since we got more clicks, our cost per click actually went down. Because it's the same cost, more clicks, your cost per click goes down. If our conversion rate stays the same, meaning the ratio of people that go to the website and sign up for our email list stays the same at 13 for both ads, which I think is reasonable because it's the same audience. That's why the CPM is the same. In that case, we would get much more leads from ad A versus ad B, 6,000 versus 2,000. And then lastly, and this is the most critical part in this example, our cost per lead for ad A is $1.60 versus ad B is about $5. The only thing that changed, though, was the click-through rate. How many people saw your ad and clicked on it? And as you can see, it had a pretty drastic impact on our performance, which is why you need to know your target audience. What's going to make them click? What's going to make them engage? Right? What are their pain points? What are their questions? How can you talk to them in an authentic way to get them to engage with your content? If not, you see what the consequences are. So that is why we spend so much time saying, who's our persona? What are they interested in? What are their pain points? How can we present this to them in a way that's going to make them take action? It helps us optimize our budget. From here, we now go into designing tactics. Again, that's how you're going to present your product or service in a way that triggers a need or a desire from your target audience or from your target audience, such as prospects and customers. This is your targeting. We're targeting one audience versus another. It's also your call to action. How am I going to get them to click? And I'll give you a good example of how that can have a big impact on your performance. One of my clients owns an e-commerce shop in Ecuador. And I was saying, okay, well, talk to me about your audience. You know, what should I know about that? He said, well, one thing you should realize is in Ecuador, we're about 10 years behind the US in regards to e-commerce. We actually don't really feel comfortable with it. There's not a lot of trust in e-commerce where you can push a button and something shows up the next day. So that's my main problem right now. I said, okay, so knowing that about your audience, let's look at your ads and how we can somewhat alleviate that challenge. I was looking at his ads and they all said free shipping, free shipping, free shipping, which for a lot of us here are like, cool, because we don't want to pay for shipping anymore, right? And I said, you know what, that's not their problem. They don't really trust this process in general, so instead of free shipping, you need to say free returns. Because that answers a question. If I don't like it, can I send it back? Right? And are you going to pay for it? So just changing their ad from free shipping to free returns, click-through rate went up, conversion rate went up, that's how they found success. So just realizing, again, going back to earlier, what's my target audience, what are their pain points? Let's address those with the ads, and you can get better outcomes. It's also going to be your creative. If you're doing any kind of social right now and you don't have videos, you're at a disadvantage because social is a passive platform, right? People didn't go on Instagram saying, oh, I hope I see an ad from somebody, right? So if you're saying, look at this little picture, then read like 100 characters, then click my ad, that might not work as well. But if you can do some kind of storytelling that's visual and intriguing, then yes, you might get them to watch 15 seconds of your video and maybe even click through to your website. So you need to have video to capture this attention. And with that, on mobile, we say you need to create thumb-stopping content because you scroll through your mobile feed faster than your desktop feed, right? So with that thumb-stopping content, it has to be super visual, even on a smaller screen, in order to get people to engage. The more you know about your audience, the better you can do that. Then it's also the channel. We can't tell people how to discover our content. And for me, I was actually humbled by one of my clients. It's actually this art gallery here in New York. And like, hey, Terry, we want to promote this. What do you think? And I was like, okay, art, why don't we do some stuff on Instagram? It's arty, right? Show some cool pictures, say that you have this installation that's going to be awesome. And they said, no, that's actually a horrible idea. And I was like, well, could you tell me how you really feel? And they said, our audience doesn't like art being pushed on them. They want to discover it, right? So it's sort of like hipsters. Like as soon as it becomes cool, like, no, I'm good, right? So they want to discover this stuff. So what we did was instead of serving ads, we wrote a lot of great content about the installation and the artists. And therefore, when they searched for these things on Google, content from our website would show up, and that's how they were made aware of this. So we couldn't push it on them. We had to pull them in by having great content. That requires a lot more patience than an Instagram ad. Because now I'm saying research these installations, research these artists, write about them in a way that's going to be interesting and something they want to share, hopefully. That's how we're going to get our audience. So again, you can't tell people how to use the internet. So just because you want to do a Facebook ad, maybe you can't. Right? So think customer first, not what do I think will be fun. So again, if you want to create awareness about your product, social media is great because you can create awareness among an audience that might take action if you give them a good reason to. In terms of CPM, it's actually cheaper on social. It's cheaper to advertise on social than it would be for paid search where someone's Googling something and you show an ad. Because it's more expensive to capture the intent of someone by bidding on that keyword, say it's men's jeans, than it is to target men who might be in your target audience for these jeans on Facebook where they're passively scrolling through all this other content as well. So I'm not saying definitely use social as opposed to paid search, because a lot of other things go into that decision-making process, but the CPM is lower on social because it's a passive channel, right? That said, it is really on you to create some content that's going to make them stop scrolling and take action as well. So are people actually looking for your product, right? So if someone's actually searching, in this case, for a really expensive water bottle that glows when you should drink, sure, you can advertise on that if you are Hydrate Spark. And again, you're actually bidding on search queries such as water bottle or smart bottle, things of that nature. When someone types it in, your ad can appear based on how much you're bidding, as well as another metric called quality score. And quality score is a function of, first of all, your click-through rate, how many people see that ad and click. It's also a function of how long they spend on your landing page once they click through. If someone clicks your ad and then almost immediately leaves and goes back to the SERP, we call it, the search engine results page, Google takes that as a negative signal that you did not give them a good experience, right? So let's say all of you right now Googled pizza near NYU, and I had an ad that showed up that said, free pizza near NYU, click here, and then you went to my landing page and said, ha ha ha. That's a bad experience, right? You're not going to spend much time, you're just going to get annoyed and leave. So egregious example, but that's what happens, right? So the more time people spend on your page, the less you will pay to advertise on Google, right? So we need to realize some of these nuances of each platform, because just knowing that, you're going to say, look, we need some great content. You know what? We should have a video on the landing page. It's going to be much more intriguing, perhaps, than us just writing about ourselves. Let's have a video or a product demo or testimonial, because we know paid search is really important for us right now, and we know the more time they spend on the page, the cheaper it's going to be for us. So let's do that. Right, so that's the value of knowing these things. And with paid search, you often want to align with an expert or a freelancer first, because look what can happen if you don't. For some reason, this bottle is $1,500, so that's obviously a typo. I hope no one would pay $1,500 for a water bottle. But yeah, this was a live ad that was served for a $1,500 water bottle, which makes this Hydrate Spark look cheap, so that's good, comparing and contrasting. But I see things like this all the time, and I'm like, do you realize that that's kind of a lot for a water bottle? I want to assume that's a typo, right? Another way you can capture search intent is through SEO, search engine optimization, right? And this is really great because you're getting free traffic to your site, or free appearances for your URL. I'm using air quotes when I say free, because there's a lot that goes into this, right? So there are some things on your website that can make you rank higher in SEO. meaning having really good content. So let's say we're selling men's jeans. You're talking about men's jeans, but then you also have some like guide for how to wear jeans with boots, right? So if someone's Googling how to wear jeans with boots, then your website can come up. So there's this content marketing aspect to it that you want to spend a lot of time on, right? But beyond that, it's also the number of sites that link to you, saying if you want to learn about jeans, check out this website. Which means at one point or another, an actual human has to say, yes, I'm going to link to you, because to Google, that's a vote that you have good content. Other people are saying, this is great. You should go to this site. However, SEO is often abused by shady people, just to give it a word. So for example, years ago, let's say you're trying to promote the fact that you sell men's jeans. You might have a white background on your website, and there might be white font underneath that says men's jeans like 1,000 times. And that would work. 10 years ago, that would make you rank really high for men's jeans because you're like, wow, you really like men's jeans. It's on here 1,000 times. That would work. Not anymore. You'll get penalized if you try that. And I bring that up because recently one of my clients came to me and they have amazing video on their landing page. And they said, Terry, we have this great video, it looks great, but you know what? We didn't want the transcript to be on there because we thought it would take away from it. So we have the transcript on there, but it's in white text and a white background. What do you think? And I was like, unfortunately, you have just violated one of the basic principles of SEO, and you're actually getting penalized for that. Through no fault of their own, they were violating this best practice, right? That's why you want to learn these things, even if you're not the one executing digital marketing ever, whatever agency you're working with or freelancer, so on and so forth. The more you know about this stuff, the more of an informed conversation you can have, right? Yeah, go ahead.
So just for clarity, so you don't want to have a video or white background? Is that the takeaway?
Yeah, I'll repeat that too. So the question was, you don't want to have a video with a white background. You can have a video, that's fine, but the challenge I had with that client is they had the transcript from the video written in white text on a white background, right? Which some people do to abuse the system. So that's a negative signal to Google. So unbeknownst to them, they were actually hurting their SEO ranking just by doing that. And that's where I really like to help people, saying like, okay, I know you didn't know this, I know you weren't trying to be shady, but as per Google, that's shady. So we got to stop doing that stuff. I also mentioned this, if you get links from another site, that helps you. What some people used to do was trade a link for a link, saying, hey, if you give me a link, I'll give you a link, right? And let's all do that. It worked really well for a while, and now you get penalized. So there's a lot of shady stuff that goes into SEO, unfortunately. And then beyond that, it takes a lot longer to take effect than, let's say, paid search. So if you start optimizing your site in January, you might not see results until April, just to give you a number. But whatever person is doing that, you got to pay them in January, right? So they're not going to say, oh, pay as you go. It's like, no, you got to like pay like now, which is why you want to be really well informed about whatever channel that you're advertising on, because you want to have the right questions to ask, right? So that's SEO. It's great because you are bringing this organic traffic to your website, but you just want to make sure that you're following best practices and working with a very legit agency. If you're looking to grow organically, refer a friend programs work great as well, all right? Because you're now using people to amplify your reach and saying, hey, if you like my product, then go ahead and tell a friend. But with that, it's really important to make sure you're reaching satisfied customers, not someone who signed up yesterday. So you want to look at across your database and say, look, who's been using my product or service for a while? Who seems happy? Reach out to them. Don't reach out to someone who's like infrequently using your app or who only made 1 or 2 purchases and say, hey, by the way, you want to do my job for me? Because they probably don't, right? And in fact, that could turn them off to the point where they unsubscribe from your email and you can't market to them anymore from there. Another thing to realize is when you're doing a referral campaign, the person who's willing to offer the referral, who's willing to send out that referral, they're obviously a lot more entrenched to you as a company. Like they like you, hopefully your product or service. But the friend just got an email from their friend. They're like, wait, what? So you want to make sure you're giving a really good deal to both parties. And in this case, if you give someone 10% off this Hydrate Spark, you get $7, right? So the Hydrate Spark costs $60. 10% off would be $6. Is now $54. I might not want it still. Like, look, I don't want to spend $54 on a water bottle either. Like, it's not any better, right? So maybe you need to have a better offer. You need to escalate that offer to something else. And the question comes, well, how much should I be willing to give away if there is a numeric value? That's when you go back to your KPIs and say, well, what was my desired cost per acquisition for a purchase? What am I willing to pay? Because in that case, that's going to help you back into saying how much you're willing to give away as a referral bonus, right? I will say this, though. People that are referred to a company from a friend typically have a higher lifetime value, meaning they might say they spend more over the course of how long they're going to be a customer than people that are not referred. So now you want to bake that into an extent as well. Let's say your desired cost per acquisition to sell one of these is $10. If it's a referral, you're saying, okay, maybe I'm willing to give away $15 for that one because I know they're more likely to be a lifetime customer. So a lot goes into this process, right? If you want to grow quickly and efficiently, you can do contests, right? In this case, you're signing up to this website to win 2 free bottles. It's also a really great way to get testimonials because you need social proof on your website and your app that people like it. It can't just be you saying how great we are. We need someone else saying, yeah, I like it too. So if you really want to jumpstart getting this social proof or these testimonials, contests are a great way to get your product in somebody's hands. However, with that, you want to make sure you're giving away something that's aligned with your product or service, such as, in this case, a water bottle. You would not want to say, oh, if you enter this contest to win like an iPad from Hydrate Spark, because that has nothing to do with your company necessarily. And what can happen is you have a bunch of people on your email list who want an iPad, not a Hydrate Spark. Therefore, your open rate, meaning the people that open your email, will go down, and your unsubscribe rate can go up. Right? So don't just give away stuff just to give it away, because often you can have the wrong people on your list, and it's not going to do you any good. I see this happen a lot with social media campaigns. You're saying, follow us to win this, follow us to win that, and then when you announce the contest is over on April 20th, you lose all these people. They're like, all right, well, I didn't want a trip to Cancun, I'm out. Right? So that's probably not the best way to build your base, because you don't have overly loyal people that are engaging with your social feed in this case. There's this really cool tool that I use. It's called Social Blade, where you can actually put in the URL for a company's Instagram or Facebook and look at their followers go up and down. And I'll often take a look at their social feed and say, did you have a contest? And then you announce it on this date, because I'm seeing a huge drop right now. So again, it's called Social Blade, and you can put in somebody's Instagram and look at their followers over a period of time. So back to designing these tactics. In this case, we are going to do a Facebook ad. And within the Facebook platform, you can actually target people who exhibit specific interests as per Facebook. So part of that's due to the websites you browse or the apps you use. It could be things that you engage with on Facebook as well, but you're putting these interest categories based on those behaviors. And believe it or not, we can target people who have an interest in water. But do me a solid, raise your hand if you have drinking water in the last, let's say, 3 days. Pretty much all of us, right? Yeah. So yeah, we've all drinking water in the last 3 days. So like, this is probably not the strongest signal or strongest audience targeting for us to use. How about this? I can target people that show an interest in Aquafina or Camelback or just any kind of hydration system. So at least I know that they're actively searching for content in regards to a water bottle or, in this case, even Camelback. I could do that. But this thing's $60, right? So I'm thinking more about my audience. Who are these people? I think they're somewhat techie, and they're into like the quantified self, like the same person that would wear a Fitbit maybe. Therefore, maybe that's what I do. I target people that have an interest in Fitbit or IoT devices, Internet of Things, because they'll see that and say, like, you know what? Yeah, I need some more techie stuff. Like for me, I buy all sorts of gadgets, and my wife's like, why do we have this? I'm like, oh, you don't want to know what time it is in, Indiana? So yeah, people like me who would just buy stuff because we're techie, or again, we're into that quantified self, like I'm wearing a Fitbit. This could be a great audience to start from, right? But we could still test that against the Camelback audience and see which one works better. The way we would measure that is our KPIs, our cost per lead. Which one cost us more to get a lead? Was it the IoT one or was it the Camelback one? That's how you just say this is working and this is not working. So getting even more granular, here's one of my favorite tactics when I'm doing a Facebook or Instagram ad. I'm targeting people on mobile only when they're on a Wi-Fi network. So I'll let you know, by default, Facebook and Instagram or pretty much any social channels, about 75 to 80% mobile. That's how we get on social platforms. And in this case, I'm saying for my ads, my conversion-based ads, I'm only going to target people on mobile when they're on Wi-Fi. Why am I doing that? What's the difference between targeting someone when they're on Wi-Fi versus a mobile network?
It costs you, or it doesn't cost like your data.
Yeah, your data, right? It's gonna, if you're on Wi-Fi, you're not incurring any cost per data. Yeah, so maybe I'll get more engagement from them, right? Why else would I do that? Go ahead.
They probably are at somewhere that they'll spend a long time, so they're in a more like stable environment. So in the office or instead, when you're at Wi-Fi, you're probably waiting for someone at a coffee shop or something, so your attention will be quickly removed later.
Yeah, so you're more stable, right? You're not just like walking through Whole Foods or something like that. You're on your couch, you're at school, you're at work, and with that, yeah, you could be much more likely to actually convert. And in fact, with my clients, I've done this test several times, and typically we'll see conversion rates increase by about 15 to 20%. Meaning 15 to 20% more people are actually converting for whatever we're asking them to do when they're on Wi-Fi versus just being on mobile. Go ahead.
How long did you see that change happen?
The longest campaign I did was about a month. The shortest one was about 4 days. And with that, that's going to depend on your sales cycle, meaning how long should I wait to run a test? Because let's pretend you're selling like ink toner. You would have good data within a couple days, because ink toner is not something you kind of browse around for a while and say, oh, I wonder what's going on with ink toner these days. You need ink toner. But if it's like a Hugo Boss suit, there's a longer sales cycle, so you could not say this is conclusive until you would know the average person has probably made a purchase by now, and that might be like 10 days. So it's going to vary by product or service how long you can wait to say it looks like we have good data coming in. So yeah, with this Wi-Fi button, again, let's say you're doing videos, they're going to load a lot better on a Wi-Fi network than mobile, and I just said video is super important, right? So more and more reasons why you should use this option. So yeah, test it out for anyone who's running campaigns. Then you're executing the campaign. That's what platform you're going to be on. To your earlier point, how long they're running for. Are you using any kind of third-party tools such as Adobe or Marin to manage your campaigns? It's really important. Also, who's doing this? Is it an agency? Are you doing it internally? Who's keeping an eye on these campaigns while they're running to make sure things don't go crazy? What I often do with my clients is I help them set up alerts that'll send them an email if their KPIs are completely higher or lower than they want them to be. So if your desired cost per lead is $2, you'll get an email if it's like, let's say, $2.40 for the last 2 days, saying, look, I know you're busy, but you got to check this out because you're not necessarily on pace to hit your goal right now. And I do that because I realize you often have other stuff to do than look at campaigns all day. So with that, you would know, so long as I don't get an email saying, by the way, take a look at this ad or take a look at this campaign, that you're within your desired outcome of your KPIs. So you want to set up those alerts so you can sleep better at night, or just actually enjoy your weekend instead of worrying about how your campaigns are doing. From there, you're going to measure your campaigns. We talk about Google Analytics a lot because it's free, and it's a great way to measure what's going on your website. But for various platforms such as LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, you're going to have specific tracking for that platform that your developer is going to need to put on your website or your app. If it's your website, we call that a pixel or a tracking cookie. If it's your app, it's going to be an SDK, stands for Software Development Kit. But you would need to speak to your developer to track the customer journey throughout your website or your app to make sure that you're reporting on all these important actions. Right? And with that, you want to think about what are called micro conversions as well. Not just a direct conversion, meaning someone signing up for your email list. Let's say if someone goes to the Hydrate Spark website and they change the color from a blue bottle to a red bottle, I would consider that to be a micro conversion because they're browsing a little bit, right? They're at least showing some kind of interest, saying, oh, I wonder how that looks in blue versus red. And then you can say, okay, well, based on that, people who make that action are they more likely to convert than people who just go there and don't convert. All right, so you want to think about that as well. A lot of my clients track video views on their website as a micro conversion. Meaning if someone watches this video within the next 30 days, are they more or less likely to convert than people who have not watched the video? the answer is yes, that tells you, first of all, create more videos because it actually is increasing your conversion rate. And second of all, maybe have it more prominent on your website. Have it higher or above the fold, we say, so you can see it without scrolling down. So when we're tracking this, it's important not just to consider direct conversions, meaning a lead in this case. You want to think about those micro conversions as well. And that's often the missing piece from campaigns. So these are examples of outcomes. This is how you would report it to any stakeholder. So your manager, an investor, so on and so forth. We got 12,500 leads. Cost per lead was $1.60. Conversion rate, click-through rate, cost per click, so on and so forth. And then from here, these become your benchmark KPIs, meaning how can I improve this next time, right? And when you're budgeting, you're going to budget and say, well, actually, our cost per lead was $1.60. So if we need 1,600 leads, we actually need $100 instead. So when you're optimizing, again, you're going to look at segments such as, one ad versus another, or one age, one gender, one platform, and say, where was I getting those goals? Where was I achieving my goal most efficiently? And then you're going to spend as much money as possible into these well-performing segments. All right. So I'll show you an example of what that looks like because there's definitely no best way to do it. But if you look at all your data across various channels, in this case, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so on and so forth, we could see what our cost per lead was across all these channels and say, wow, it looks like Instagram was our best option because it's only $1 cost per lead. And then next time you would spend as much money as possible in Instagram with whatever audience that was until you hit diminishing returns. The diminishing returns are when your cost per lead starts to go up. Because by design, the algorithms for these platforms reach people who are more likely to take action on your ad. So you might find that after a while, you've exhausted these really, really active people who are likely to take action, and you're reaching other people that are more passive and might not want to, or you'll notice that your frequency has increased. What's frequency? What's that mean for your ads? Go ahead.
How often that your ads will show up in their windows?
Exactly. So frequency is how often the same person, how many times the same person has seen the same ad, more or less. If you see that you have 1,000 people in your target audience, to give it a number, and you've reached 400 people, but your ad frequency is 3, that means the algorithm's saying, look, I don't think the other 600 people want to see your ad, so we're just not going to. So now we're showing it to repeat people. That's another way you would know that you exhausted your audience, and you need to choose the next best option on here. Right? So that's why I say these KPIs, these are the great equalizer to let us know what's working better. And you would look at your data over time and say, okay, are these stable, or am I seeing that I'm hitting a point of diminishing returns? And you would pivot strategies. And with that, one thing that I like a lot about digital marketing in general is something is always changing. There's always some change in the algorithm or the platform, or sometimes just the way like you use your phone that's going to have an impact on how well your campaigns are performing. So you can never say, you know what, we're good. Let's just ride this out for a couple of years. We got our campaigns optimized. Let's just go home early, right? That's not going to happen because there's always some kind of algorithm change. And there was a big one recently. There's a lot of stuff going on with Facebook, but there was a big one recently with Facebook where they stopped. They started reducing their reach that brands would get in the feed for their ads, meaning you'll see more posts from your friends and family as opposed to brands. So the organic reach for brands was decreased. And with that, some companies are already going out of business as a result of that, because they were relying on getting this free organic reach to send people to their website where they were monetizing that traffic. And with the algorithm changing, they're not getting that same website traffic, so they're like, look, our business model, the way it works, we can't succeed, and we're done, right? And that's why I always say, you don't want your business to be just so dependent on an algorithm that can change tomorrow. So you want to capture owned channels such as your email list or a chat bot or an app, something you have control over, not an algorithm on Twitter, which could change tomorrow based on one thing or another. It's very dangerous to put all those eggs in that basket, which is this algorithm in this case, right? And lastly, another thing I see a lot of marketers that they're missing is content marketing, right? How do I provide value to you first to get you to come to my website or my app and do something? And content marketing is an extremely unselfish form of marketing because you're putting the customer or the prospect first. which is really hard to do when you're like, look, I got to pay these bills too, right? The lights are going to go off if I don't bring money in. So when you talk about content marketing, it should be intellectually wed to your product or service, but it should be divorced from any kind of direct response. And it's hard to find that balance sometimes because some brands think content marketing is, instead of just saying, click here, buy the shirt, it's like someone wearing the shirt on the beach. I'm like, well, no, that's still you trying to advertise your shirt. Content marketing is you providing valuable and relevant information to your target audience. And again, that goes right back to that honeycomb that we talked about before, right? What is going to be valuable and relevant? I'll give you a few examples, all right? So let's say we're Nike, we could have some blog about tips for how to exercise when it's hot outside. Make sure you stay hydrated, wear light layers, so on and so forth, right? That's a blog that someone's going to look for. They're going to Google, like, all right, it's really hot, but I still got to run. Nike has this great content. Their website shows up. That's content marketing. Or that's an ad that they serve to people that they know are interested in working out. Get them to the website and then retarget them with additional ads saying, by the way, that jacket that we mentioned in that ad or that shirt we mentioned, it's now 20% off. Click here, buy now. That's called a warm audience, right? Because they've actually been to your website, they know who you are, they've engaged. Warm audiences are much more active and engaging than cold audiences. So instead of just saying, buy this jacket, it's hot outside, I'm going to say, all right, let me provide value to you first. Or an airline could just have a blog on best ways to pack for a trip, which I know I could use because I always overpack for some reason. So again, like here are ways to pack so you have the essentials, but you don't bring too much stuff. Here's one that's going even a bit further. A marketing tech company like Adobe, right? Adobe's expensive. It's going to cost, if you want to get like their analytics platform, it might be like $100,000. And often the decision maker who says yes or no is not the person who's going to be using it. And beyond that, sometimes they don't even know how to use it. Like, I don't even know what half these terms mean. So the decision maker for buying products, but they're also the decision maker for hiring people. So if you go to interview with this person, you can just throw a bunch of terms at them, like KPIs and algorithms. They're like, all right, cool, sounds good, I don't know. So I could put together a blog on how to interview a digital marketer and say, these are the questions to ask. How do you plan a campaign? How do you come up with KPI targets? How do you budget on a channel basis? If I just had that blog laid out for that person, that decision maker, I'm doing them a favor because they're like, look, I got to hire somebody next week and I have no clue what to ask them. Like, like she sounded like she knew a lot of stuff or he had a nice tie. I don't know, they got hired, right? Or if you're a fast food restaurant, a bunch of mean tweets, right? Because apparently that works for Wendys. It all depends on your audience though, like who you're serving ads to or who you're trying to get to come to your website. Hugo Boss had a really nice one. It was actually how to negotiate for a higher salary. Hugo Boss suits are kind of expensive, right? So anyone who can afford that, you might think they're in a position to actually negotiate for a higher salary. But they also did that in conjunction with Forbes, because why would I take like a career information from Hugo Boss? I'm like, all right, you guys make good clothes. So co-branding that with Forbes is a great way to bring more authenticity to it and have another partner that's going to help amplify their content, right? So partnering with influencers, that's why you see it a lot of times, because they bring that authenticity to the approach that you're presenting to your target audience. So in the case of Hydrate Spark, they do have some great blogs on their website. For example, 10 reasons why water is the ultimate health drink. Pretty aspirational there. And you want to have a series of these blogs that are, again, not just talking about the Hydrate Spark all day. It's providing value to your target audience in one way or another. But like I said before, video is essential too because you have this passive audience and you want to make sure they're engaging with you. Having a video on your landing page has been shown to increase conversion rate by up to 80%. That was a study done by HubSpot, I believe. And by conversion rate, I mean lead generation, not necessarily selling stuff, but lead generation. So again, you want to explain why someone actually wants to engage with your product or service. Going even deeper into lead generation, platforms such as Facebook have what are called lead ads. And with that, I can contact that same person who read my blog from Nike and say, hey, by the way, we have great content that we produce every week. If you hit that button and say subscribe, we're going to send it to you every week directly to your inbox. In this case, it would scrape your name and your email address directly off of your Facebook profile. You hit submit, and that advertiser has your information. The goal with this is to reduce the friction involved in acquiring a lead. Because if I ask you to go to my website, it might load too slow, or you might not necessarily like the content you're seeing there. With this, I can immediately capture your interest. You're never leaving the Facebook platform, and I can capture that contact information. LinkedIn has the same ad unit. Some of you might have seen that before. So if you're doing B2B, that would be a good idea, right? Or something to try. So LinkedIn, same thing. You hit submit. It's going to scrape your email address directly off your LinkedIn profile. That advertiser now has access to it. They can download it via CSV. It also syncs with several CRM systems such as MailChimp. So you can easily put that data in there. So your mobile speed matters because people on social, they don't necessarily want to click off of social, and if they do, you need to give them a good experience. In fact, back in August of last year, Facebook and Instagram started decreasing their reach that slowly loading mobile websites would get in the newsfeed. So you're saying, hey, how come I can't reach my goal of impressions? I would say, that's because your website loads too slow. What's that have anything to do with it? I'm still paying for these ads. Yeah, but they want them to have a good experience. So therefore, you can't pay your way out of this. You need to actually fix your website. Now you're going back to your developer again and saying, hey, by the way, that big image we have on there, can we compress that? It's huge. I mean, it looks good, but so does money. So we gotta fix this stuff. All right, so it's not all front-end stuff where you're creating awesome ads and getting clicks and everything. It's like what happens when they get there as well. It's really important. And the more you understand these things and effectively communicate with people on your team, such as the designer who made that big image, just telling that person, like, look, I know, I think it's great too, but we got to compress it because it's actually hurting our quality score. What's quality score? It's a metric that helps us pay less for paid ads, right? So you want to educate people and say, here's why I'm asking you this stuff. I'm not just trying to bug you, but there's a desired outcome I'm aiming towards, and if we all work together on this, we can do that. So what I do with my clients is I often have them do show and tells, where they'll bring in everyone from various departments and say, look, just real quick, just talk about your job, some things you're working on, and how people can support you. Right? Because if everybody gets, oh, that's why I keep on getting these emails about, making this image smaller, like, all right, cool, I can do that. I didn't know, because I have all this other stuff on my plate as well. So, in conclusion, I'll give you some takeaways. You want to start with a goal, which I know by now sounds kind of redundant, but some people don't, because it is really fun just to make an ad real quick, but you're like, what are you going to do? I don't know, we'll find out. You want to have a goal in mind that's aligned with your target audience and what they care about. Right? Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right? That's why we need this authenticity. We can't just say, oh yeah, click here, buy now, we're the experts. We have to say, like, look, we get it's hot outside and you still want to work out. Check out this blog, right? We're going to give you some tips for how you can do this. Go out there early in the morning, stay hydrated, so on and so forth. Then determine what channels they want to be reached on, not what channels you want to use. And yes, you know what? Sometimes it's going to require more work if you have to create some great content for that, but that's the way it goes. And exchange value for their audience's time, right? Because time's the one thing that we can't necessarily get any more of. And then from there, measure, test, and optimize. You're never done, right? You're always repeating because you always want to improve on what you've done before and react to any changes that happen on various platforms. Great. So, what's next? I would advise you to go to my website and check out some of the blogs I have available on there. There's one specifically for campaign optimization. If you go there, there's some dummy data that you can play around with to start practicing optimizing campaigns. So you can download that Excel sheet and check that out. But it'll get you used to the whole process before you're using your own data. If there is one blog I would advise you to check out, there's several, which I'd love to share with you, but if there is one, I would say Marketing Land. And the reason why I'm saying that is because they curate information from various other platforms and serve it in a more concise version. But then beyond that, what you can do is say, all right, well, I only want to opt into certain kind of content, such as social or mobile or analytics, and that's what's coming to your inbox. Because one other challenge I see with teams is they subscribe to all these lists, and they get so many emails a day, they don't read any of them. All right, you're just like, ugh, I'm done. So you want to curate your inbox with what blogs you're subscribing to. This one I like a lot. Another thing is if you are working on a team, I often encourage my clients to just elect one person each week to read through these blogs and say, look, here's something I found that's going to impact us and this client, and here's why it's important. So you're going to take turns just summarizing this content, because even if I say, look, only read one blog, you're still not going to. I get it, you get busy. But if one person each week is responsible for reading this stuff, and then writing a very concise email saying, here's what happened with Instagram, here's what happened with Twitter, here's what happened with Google, here's how it impacts us, and here's what we should do next. That accountability is going to make it a lot better, and that concise statement is going to make it a lot more digestible. So with that, you can open it up to questions. Hi.
So it was awesome.
Cool, thanks.
And, but I can see, this is when you have something and it's all set up. What if it's something completely new and you don't know, what your audience is? Just yet. Where do you go from there? How do you start?
Yeah, I mean, with that, when you have a product or service, you typically have some kind of end user in mind, but you'd want to do some surveys even, or do some panels, say like, look, I have this new product, what do you think about it, who would be interested, what other attributes would you like to see, and then from there, start focusing on more on a persona, which is easily going to change once you hit critical mass in your data, right? Those first 1,000 customers or first 1,000 people that take some kind of action, that's really what's going to help you get more defined in regards to who your target audience is. And then look at conversion data, seeing who's converting, who's not. But then lastly, just realizing you might have more than one persona, right? Let's say you're a bank. Some people are there for home loans, some are there for auto loans, some are there for like education for their kids. You might find that you have these segments within your persona that you can't speak to the same way. So now you're segmenting your communication and the way you're presenting your business value in order to be more authentic with them. So just to put some numbers behind it, let's say like during the whole data gathering process, you have a $1,000 budget, maybe you spend $200 just kind of putting some ads out there, seeing who's responding, and then from there start tweaking based on the conversions that you're seeing come in from there. And it can be a high-level conversion. It can be someone who signs up for your email list, right? Don't necessarily wait for, an actual purchase or something like that. Yeah. Starting out's always rough because you're like, I have no data. But got ambition, no data. Yeah. Cool. Hi.
Thank you so much. This is extremely insightful. So I have two questions. One is, what are your thoughts on affiliate or influencer marketing?
All right, let me answer the first one first because I can't do two-part questions.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already answering the first one and the second one's coming. What are my thoughts are on affiliate and influencer marketing? So those are similar, but not necessarily directly the same thing. So an affiliate marketer is when someone is paid to advertise or promote your product, and they get paid a cut of any kind of conversions that come through. I think it is a great way to grow your audience who is going to be exposed to the opportunity to convert. It's also a great way to control your cost per acquisition because you can tell them, I'm only paying you $10 per conversion, right? With that, there are some controls you want to put in place in regards to how they're going to communicate your message. And you need to make sure that you have really good attribution for any kind of conversions they're bringing in. So what I've done before with my clients is I said, okay, cool, you're doing affiliate marketers. Let's give them their own unique URL that they're going to use to promote, and therefore when it comes into Google Analytics, I would know this came from that influencer or that affiliate. What I've also done is this. I've taken a look at that traffic and segmented it between new users and returning users. Because if an affiliate's sending me a bunch of returning users, they're not growing my audience any. Right? These are people that already heard of me in the first place. I mean, they've been to my website during that time period. So you're not helping me grow if you're just sending me the people that have already heard of me before. So you do want to get pretty granular in how you measure that and how you understand their impact. So as long as you have that set in place, I think it's a great idea. Influencers are totally different. It's funny, I was just stopping by one of my clients before I came here. He was a pretty big influencer. And with that, it's often challenging to get attribution because you're often paying them for impressions. Right, you're saying, talk about my product or service on Instagram, and I'm going to pay you for every X thousand impressions. But then the question is, what did I get for it? All right, so if they're not actively using like a promo code or a link to click through, it can be hard. What I often do is this. I'll do a correlation between how many impressions that post got and how many, let's say, like organic visits you got to your website that day, or are people using your branded term to go directly there? And say, are we seeing a correlation between these 2.1 million impressions you got over these 3 days and traffic coming to your website that we can say, look, it seems like it's strongly correlated with those impressions you got on Instagram. So you want to get much more granular into how you're measuring that. Otherwise, I could say, yeah, I'm an influencer and I got 1 million impressions, but if nobody did anything after that, it doesn't matter, right? So yeah, it's a murky territory sometimes.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just one more. So more of an example, like supposing I'm a brand and I have advertised my campaign, supposing on Instagram, in print media, on TV, multiple places. And a consumer from Instagram ad, he goes and signs up or whatever. He sees my website and I can see that, from Instagram they've accessed. But what if the ultimate purchase was from from the TV ad or from the print ad?
Yeah.
Even though I can measure my digital, like, this was like how many signups I got if he visited my website, but the ultimate conversion was from somewhere else. So is there a way of tracking that actually the conversion was from where?
Yeah, so the question is, someone saw an Instagram ad, clicked and converted, but what if they also saw a TV ad or a billboard ad? How do we get attribution for that? That can be challenging, and I'm sure on the subway you've seen like these ads before that said, hey, use code subway1234 to redeem. That's one way to do it. Another is what's called a match market lift test. And by that I mean you would do both Instagram ads as well as, let's say, subway ads in Buffalo, but only do Instagram ads in Syracuse and see if there's an incremental lift between areas that had both subway and Instagram ads, or same thing with TV. But that's often, again, that's a bit trickier too, but that's the way you would want to do that because that's the holy grail, like offline to online attribution, being able to understand that. It's challenging, but that's one way you can do it. Yeah. Hey.
Presentation.
Yeah.
What is your advice for someone who wants to get to be like a digital marketer? Is there like a certification or what the person should do?
Yeah, so the question is, for someone who wants to become a digital marketer, what should some next steps be? I would say, first of all, decide if there's some specific channels you care more about than others, right? Because maybe you like email, I think that's awesome, I think it's a lot of fun, but SEO, after that guy's talk, seems kind of hard. So decide if you want to specialize, because you often get rewarded a bit more for specializing in some cases, unless you're like running a department. But if you do want to get certified just in digital marketing in general, there's several ways to do that. HubSpot actually has an inbound marketing certification, which is free, so that's affordable for everybody. It's also industry recognized. You can also consider taking a class here at NYU, right? There's a digital marketing certification class here that's offered. I actually taught one of the classes a couple weeks ago. You can do that as well. I would just say, once you get it, what are you going to do with it too? So have a plan. Like, you don't want to just say, I'm a digital marketer and that's who I am. I would think, what are you really passionate about? Because with digital marketing, it changes all the time. And if you're not passionate and gritty, you're going to get frustrated. So for me, I like Googling things and researching. That's how I am naturally. But if you're not that into the channel, you're going to say, all right, there's another change. I got to do this. It shouldn't feel like work. It should be like, well, I'm really curious and passionate to see how I can now apply this to my business, as opposed to saying, oh, great, another algorithm change. So, think if you want to specialize, and then think, what are you going to do afterwards, I would say.
I'm just wondering, do you got more insights from actually experience while you are actually doing certain campaigns with your clients, or from rating or other sources like the blog that you listed earlier?
Yeah, so it's a combination of both. The question was, do you get more experience from actually running campaigns, or do you learn more from reading blogs? It's a combination of both. I would not necessarily align myself with anyone who's saying they're an expert but they've never done this thing or they haven't done it recently. You do want to get your hands dirty and like go through those frustrations we were talking about earlier, saying, how do I optimize this ad? Because from that you learn a lot. But if you're so busy with your head down maintaining these campaigns that you don't have time to read a blog, you miss out on all these updates. And that's the role I play with my clients, because I get it. I used to be an account manager when I was at Adobe. I was there for 3 years managing campaigns for Adobe, Amazon, like all these huge companies. I didn't have time to breathe sometimes to come up and say, oh, okay, I'm going to read this blog. So for me, I can empathize with any client who's going through that and say, look, I'm just going to tell you the stuff you need to know that's really important, right? There's 10 things going on this week. Here are the 3 critical ones you need to know. If it rains tomorrow, take a look at the other 7. So that's my approach, is focusing on impact as opposed to just throwing a bunch of stuff at people, because I've been there. I get it. You don't want to just make some recommendations that are going to have people just like digging around and like wasting time, more or less. So both is the answer. But to get that initial experience, you have to be willing sometimes to like volunteer at a nonprofit or do some campaigns for a friend of the family. You can't show up to an agency and say, hey, I've never done this before, but I read a book about it and I'm passionate, right? So you have to like make sure that you are willing to do some grunt work and maybe not get paid for it.
Do we have any other questions?
Any other questions?
Digital marketing expert in the house.
I charge a lot, so yeah, I'm joking. Does anyone have another question who already asked one and is feeling like, I don't want to ask two? I see some moving over here.
I was gonna say, just breaking into new things, as I began with, that's complicated. Just in terms of like how you position things on, oh, well, here's a great one. So I'm involved with one category, which is totally brand new that our company is going to be looking at. And people were like, well, you know, the person involved with it should be authentic and share their story. What's the right balance, because this is something we're thinking about and talking about, between sharing something authentic and sharing too much information. Do you know what I mean? Where it like borders in this, like, that's too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, let's say you're flying somewhere, like you're gonna have a conversation with the person next to you, you wanna get to know them, but they start getting personal, like, whoa, like, like, I don't think we're gonna go that deep. Yeah, I mean, I think internally you should have an idea of saying if you're going too far or not. That's why it's good to have, you want to have diversity and you want to have several people weighing in and saying like, look, I think this is like maybe not the way we want to present our company, especially if it's a very sensitive topic, right? Because even with that Hydrate Spark, we could say, oh, the reason why I'm drinking water is because this happened to me when I was younger. It's like, okay, maybe we don't need to know that, right? You know, so maybe just like go more higher level. But that's why it's good to have that decision made by a committee of people that come from diverse backgrounds. And someone might say, like, look, I think, you know, this might be a trigger for some people, just based on my experiences, and maybe we should just not do that.
And the survey, what would you recommend there? That's something our company is looking at too. In fact, I have a meeting with someone tomorrow about that.
Yeah.
You know, we were looking at the idea of surveys and how we might approach that, because we have a couple of diverse things. So this could apply to anyone.
Yeah.
With a couple of diverse things in your lineup, how do you decide which to focus on? And we struggle with that because there are different kinds of products in it. So which ones do we focus on? They would appeal to different users.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few ways to do that for a relatively low cost. The question is surveys, how can we conduct them? There's Google surveys, those are like $2 each, $2 per response, where they would poll certain people, ask them a question, you know, which product would you rather buy? SurveyMonkey does the same thing. If you want to have them run these surveys for them, for you, you can do that. You can even do it, I've seen a lot of companies do this with Instagram stories. I was talking to Walmart recently, and I showed them an example from Fresh Direct, how they were trying to determine like what new products to release, saying which would you rather buy, this one or that one? And with Instagram stories, you can vote on one versus another. So you can use Instagram stories for product development if you wanted to. So you're finding a creative way to get this information, because with any kind of survey, there's survey bias. Because the question is, well, who has this much time to fill out these surveys, right? Or you just like, now you have a bunch of bored people in your data set, right? So any way you can reduce the survey bias by having it become maybe a more engaging or authentic approach, as opposed to, you know, someone who's just kind of filling out a survey to fill out a survey, you'll get better results.
So when you have 3 or 4, like maybe some folks here have the same thing, where it's a couple of different categories, or different users would be attracted to one category versus another.
Right.
Should you just pick one of those categories and just say, okay, let me go for this kind of user, or, you know, this audience?
Yeah, I mean, without knowing too much specifically about what you're talking about, I would say you want to initially follow your gut, because when you made a product or service, I'm guessing you weren't saying, oh, we'll see what happens, right? So you had someone in mind when you created it. You would want to then test that assumption through, you know, through your ads, and then see who's responding, because maybe you thought women would love this, but you're seeing men have a higher click-through rate. You say, okay, well, I was wrong. And then you kind of shift your approach from there once you get some data coming in. Yeah. That's the fun part, I mean, but here's the thing, so long as you're tracking everything, you can say, that worked, let's keep it up, that didn't work, let's not do it, and then you start getting closer to having some kind of more defined audience that you're targeting, and that is actually interacting with your stuff, so yeah, that'd be my approach. Yeah, sure thing.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Digital marketing field is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot today about algorithms changing on Facebook, all sorts of different things, and how one of the most important things about being a good digital marketer is to stay really up to date about all of the sort of updates that are happening. I'm curious to know just a few examples of some obvious things that are always being updated that we probably know, and then maybe some less obvious things. They don't have to be on Facebook. They can really
Yeah.
be on any of these tools. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so for obvious things, I will go with Facebook and Instagram for a second because it's pretty poignant. Engagement bait is something that people do where they'll say, tag a friend to do this, or comment to win this, or like to do that. That used to be a good way to get a lot of engagement, which would get you more reach. It would make you pay less if you were advertising. Facebook has now determined that to be, I'll just say corny to give it a word. Therefore, you'll get penalized if you do that. So I'm looking at RFPs from companies that are saying, oh yeah, we want to have this share to win contest. I'm like, you can't do that. And I'm like, why not? I'm like, I read this blog last week. And they're like, oh, great. So I like helping people with that because they have like all this money they're about to do for this campaign. I'm like, can't do that anymore. So that'll be one that's, kind of obvious, or not obvious, but something that's visual. But I think SEO is where you see the most like things you wouldn't even think about that can have an impact. I'll give you an example of that. If you have a pop-up on your website that captures email addresses saying, thanks for visiting, sign up for my email list, that actually, as of January of last year, has a negative impact on your SEO because it's deemed as being annoying by Google. I'm sure you all feel the same way, right? I'm not saying, hey, everybody get rid of your pop-ups. I'm saying if SEO is a big part of your strategy, consider it because you're, by design, hurting your SEO. Another thing with SEO is if you have a secure site, HTTPS, you will rank higher than an HTTP, a non-secure site, even if you're not doing e-commerce. You could be a blog about cats, but if you're a secure blog about cats, you get an advantage in regards to SEO. So these are little things you would not think about that do have an impact, and that's why, again, read those blogs, partner with some kind of freelancer or consultant or whatever, or internally just encourage everyone to stay up to date with these things because they come out of nowhere and all of a sudden, you're getting some impact that, you could have been avoided. Yeah, so you're never bored.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you again, Terry. It's always such a pleasure to have you here at NYU, and we're so grateful for your time and expertise, and we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thanks, everybody.